Hi, I'm Dave Van Oss, Agricultural Markets Manager for Libro Credit Union. Libro is very excited to be this year's presenting sponsor for the Virtual Outdoor Farm Show. We truly hope that your farm business finds great value with this upcoming session.
I'm John Gregg, editor of Farmterio. Data sharing is a sticky subject for farmers, with quite a bit of reluctance to give up ownership of that data. In this session, we're going to hear from Rozita Dara, Associate Professor of Computer Science at the University of Guelph. She's involved in the intersection of computer technology and agriculture, and is going to talk to us about data sharing and what farmers really need to be aware of when they're managing their data. Welcome to Canada's Digital Farm Show, Rozita.
Nice to meet everyone virtually. And thank you for having me. My name is Rozita Dara, and I'm Associate Professor at University of Guelph in the School of Computer Science. The title of my presentation is Data Sharing in Digital Agriculture. I just want to talk about the challenges and the landscape of policy and best practices for data sharing. Before I talk about data sharing subject, I just want to provide an overview of my research and what I do at the university. Basically, I'm a principal investigator of a research lab called Data Management and Privacy Governance. Basically, what I do at the University of Guelph, I try to apply my skills and my research to agriculture and digital agriculture. So we look at, me and my team, we look at a variety of issues related to data from the beginning that the data is collected, from sensors, IoT and, internet and various devices. We look at if it's a data sharing issue or data processing. We look at the cloud storage, for example, policies and procedures around data management and data processing. We also look at various ways of data processing to anonymize data and also make better use of data. Well, at the end, my expertise is in the area of artificial intelligence. I have a number of projects in the area of agriculture, digital agriculture, that looks at collecting data from different sources, integrating them, and analyzing them to generate knowledge and insight. So there are a few projects currently in my lab that we look at building decision support systems, whether it's for disease modeling, mushroom harvesting automation, and many other projects that are currently in my lab. Another project that I'm currently working is really into looking at agricultural data platforms. So that is very much aligned with the talk today. So with that, I'm bringing my skills from AI and data processing and privacy and security together to build data platforms for agriculture. Right now, agricultural data platforms are fragmented. Privacy and security is a major issue in these platforms. And with that, data usage and data, access to high quality data and many other issues, it takes a lot of effort to address them. I'm hoping my aim is in my research to address some of those issues, those challenges. So digital agriculture it has been a trend for a while. It used to be referred as precision agriculture. Now with ubiquitous technologies that are being developed on a daily basis, especially for farms. Farms are becoming highly digitized, and also which we refer to as digital agriculture, smart farming, or many other terminologies. Unlike traditional days that farmers used to use their experience to observe and make decisions on how to manage the farm, with the increase in use of technology, it's becoming more and more common in different sectors of agriculture to use technologies to extract data and observe the environment and allow the technology to process data and mimic farmers' knowledge and the way they manage the farms, basically to inform farmers about future and best practices. So this is, I think, technology is impacting every sector of the agriculture. Some more, such as dairy and crop, and some less, but still the change is coming if it hasn't impacted a lot yet. So why we use data and why we use technology, you're the expert, you know better than I do, but it's just, these are some examples that why technology is useful: reduce greenhouse gas, climate monitoring and decision making, optimizing precision feeding, enhancing food supply chain and traceability to be able to detect, the source of, for example, foodborne outbreak, ensure sustainability and healthy, food products, and automation basically for farm management, and many other benefits. Although there is a lot of benefit on using data, one of the challenges, there is a lot of benefit in using data, and also there is a lot of technology currently being developed and implemented for this purpose. As we can see, the trend of using sensors in farms is increasing, and this data is slightly old. I'm pretty sure even the pace could be even more rapid. But according to a statistic in 2014, only 1% of data, not for agriculture, I mean as a whole, was being used in 2014. A prediction was at that time, or maybe 2015, that I came across, that predicted in 2020 only 13% of the data that we are generating will be used. And we are now in 2020. I'm not sure if that prediction has changed, but my prediction is it hasn't gone up that much. Maybe a little bit we have advanced, and we know how useful the data is, but probably the amount of data we are generating, we are not making use of that data. There are many limiting factors for why we are not using the data that is being generated, particularly in agriculture. I'm not going to go over all of the reasons, but I'm gradually want to focus on data sharing. But some of the reasons that we are not, I won't touch on it significantly right now, would be lack of access to high quality data. Maybe there is limited adoption of those technologies because farmers they don't find it useful, or they don't trust the technology. Or maybe the data that is being generated is not useful for the purpose. Gap in data analysis and management. We don't know what data is being collected either, or if we know, we don't know how to use it. Lack of standardization. Data is being collected in different forms and format by different technology providers. So there is a limited opportunity to integrate that data. And also, there's no very strong justification why these technologies are useful in the first place. But there are other issues that also kind of is a hurdle to use of such technologies or the data. So first of all, there's lack of suitable policies and regulations for data. So I'll touch on that later on. We don't have access to a kind of decentralized but kind of integrated infrastructure that will enable secure and private, secure and kind of best management of data, whether it's we want to manage it, ensure privacy, whether we want to keep data secure, transfer data securely. There is a lack of kind of unified infrastructure around that. Lack of the suitable data governance and best practices is a lack of understanding what's the best governance practices for what sort of data, depending on their sensitivity. So because the value is not equally shared or reasonably shared, I would say there is lack of motivation to share data, and that, because, there is no value for some stakeholders in this data ecosystem landscape. Lack of transparency and trust between the farmers or different agri-food stakeholders and the technology providers. And maybe also limited awareness and knowledge about the digital tech, data practices, and all of that. So these are some of the factors that are limiting the use of agricultural data. So there has been some controversies, which I'm pretty sure you're aware of, around agricultural data. One of the old ones was around customers' credit card information, which was leaked, and employees' data which was leaked from Monsanto's databases. And also, for example, in Oklahoma, I believe a company, Tyson Foods, shared chicken farmers' production data without anonymizing or data properly. Their data aggregation strategy didn't anonymize data, and that put farmers in a kind of disadvantaged position, and it reduced their payment, which followed by they tried to sue the company. And also just recently there was a kind of a ransomware attack on agricultural data in London, Ontario, one of the companies, which data was leaked and now data is auctioned. So there are many different reasons for why all of this have happened, and these won't be the last ones, and pretty sure in the future there will be similar attacks or efforts to, or maybe because of lack of proper infrastructure, there may be loss of data. I want to touch on a topic to just separate these two, the difference between two technologies, which I thought it's better that we make the differentiation. So security, when we refer to security in the way, when we discuss security, is all about technical and physical aspect of safeguarding data. Encryption, for example, the incident with Monsanto and the company in London, Ontario, was that the company couldn't secure the data. So obviously, without proper security, we cannot keep our data private or confidential. But having security is not enough to keep data, to protect data. There are many issues around social and legal aspect of the data that needs to be also addressed. So that will take us to privacy and confidentiality. Privacy generally around the globe is referred to as protecting personal data. Whether farmers' data and which part of farm data is considered personal data, we will talk about it, but many regulations and jurisdictions, unfortunately, they don't recognize farm data as personal data. So many very kind of tight regulations, such as general data protection regulations, or our own regulation, PEPEDA, does not apply to farm data. And confidentiality is it goes based on the agreement that you have between two or more organizations. So usually farm data and agri-food data falls under the third category in terms of if you want to keep it confidential, but security is something that all infrastructure and tools should have. What are data sharing concerns? There have been some research in this area. Obviously, unlawful access to data, this is a security issue, as the examples that I just gave, but also privacy concerns. What is data ownership? What is the framework for data ownership when you get into an agreement? Misuse of data, maybe farmers or any data subjects that they consider themselves the owner of the data, they weren't aware of how data was used. And they consider that misuse. In the technology provider's view, that may be different. Sharing data with a third party. So that obviously that's a concern to all of us, whether it's a personal data or our business data. Unauthorized processing of data in a way that the owner of the data or person who gets into, is on the other side of the agreement was not aware of, So that's also a major concern of how my data was processed and used. Many farms or many farmers, they don't have any control over their data. They can get access a copy of their digital copy of their data, but that doesn't mean they have control. They cannot make a decision with whom to share or how to use data. One of the major concerns that I'm going to talk about today is about data agreements and lack of transparency. And if the agreement is transparent, that makes the whole landscape quite different. But usually the legal agreements are written in legal language, and they tend to stay in a gray area, and they are not very transparent. And then some other issues around inequality in bargaining power, and there is no co-value creation between the farmers who kind of contribute data and the technologies who use that use the data. So these are some of the concerns, majority of the concerns, but I may be missing a few. But let's look at, before we get into whether some of these concerns are legitimate or how they can be addressed, I want to have a quick look at how the technology works. Technology is becoming more and more complex. There are very complex software that goes in the back end of many of the hardware tools that you see. And with that, the complexity is growing day by day. So it's not that if we address one component or work on one component, data sharing or the risk of losing data or utilizing data in an inappropriate way is going to reduce, because there's so much complexity, or there are so many components to a software. But generally the steps are, if you are crop, livestock, or any farm you have, data goes to a platform, and then it gets aggregated, pre-processed, then AI or some kind of modeling is used to make decision, and then that data is used for a purpose. This is a simplified model. But when we dig down, we see many different layers into how the data gets collected. Is it an app? Is it a sensor? Who owns the data? Is it a technology provider? They may own their own devices and software. Farmer, they want to own whether they don't own the hardware, but they want to own their own data. And as the data gets aggregated and transferred, the ownership, if we go with that definition, completely changes, or it gets transformed, and then there may be oversight by the government over this data because of for many different reasons, social and health of the population. And it goes to a cloud, so cloud has its own contract and legal agreements. And from there, the processor, whether it's a cloud provider or another organization, and they may have their own policies and procedures and software. And as you see, this list can go on and on. It comes back to the farmer, I assume, part of the analysis, and also data gets collected by the technology provider. So I will quickly go over these two slides. So when we are collecting data, what is the purpose of the service provider collects data? Are they only collecting the data that they need? Have they asked for consent of the farmer? So these are some of the things that can be considered. So there is an agreement. Has the agreement been read by the farmers or whoever is operating the farm, or within the agri-food supply chain, any of the stakeholders? So then we talk about hardware, software, who owns it, who has the ability to change it, revise it. If you change the software, you can collect more data without even warning the farmer. So that's another consideration. The cloud provider, again, they may change their policies, they may change their procedures. There's a internet network that gets the data from one location to the other. How does that one work? What's that company? What's their policy? Who gets access to that data? Raw data is being processed. As soon as it becomes aggregated, obviously, as I said, the ownership completely changes. Artificial intelligence and modeling, the entire system, if you use the data to analyze how it's performing, then use more data, that you can improve your system. You can improve your artificial intelligence. So more data for the technology provider is better if they collect and use it. But then gradually farmers think that they have lost control over their data, because when they say we want to improve service, it doesn't clearly make sense to them, what they want to improve, so it has lots of complexity. The knowledge is used. Who is getting access to knowledge? Because that also can have privacy concern. After you analyze, they don't get access to raw data, but they get access to knowledge, and that could also be privacy breach. Then data is kept for future processing. For how long do the service provider collect the data? And also data has to be managed end to end. There are legal, semantic, and many issues that needs to be discussed. So data governance end to end is absolutely critical. And it could be many different legal agreements in between, because each of the data is processed at different stages by different organizations, or it could be just one. A recent study, I will quickly go over these, has shown that 70% this study was done in Australia, and 1,000 farmers took part in this study. So basically, results suggest that 74% of participants did not know, haven't read, or they didn't know terms and conditions on how their data was used. Only 9% of farmers indicated that they were comfortable about how, and they were aware of how their data was being used. 50% indicated that they are not comfortable that service provider has direct access to their data. Only 24% were comfortable. 56% of the farmers expressed that they had no or little trust in the service and technology provider, in a sense that they can protect their data. The breaches that I just mentioned won't happen. Only 56% had the trust. And in another study, they concluded that only 77% of the farmers were concerned about organizations who have access to their farm data, and also with whom their data is being shared. Their data were being shared. So if we continue on that, some other findings by that two studies was participants showed moderate level of interest in sharing data with service providers. So that was also aligned with what I previously just mentioned. Majority of participants had concerns about lack of transparency of the data agreements. But an interesting observation was so this study was with 1,000 farmers. They worked with different sectors, agriculture sectors in Australia and US. But they found out that if for some of the farmers or participants or people who responded to the survey, if they had better understanding of terms and condition of the data practices, of data licenses, they were more willing to share their data. They were more willing to trust and give direct access to data to the service provider only if they knew that their raw data would be kept and it won't be shared by any other organization. It could be to improve the processes and practices they would share it with the trusted party, but not beyond that. And that trusted party would follow the same agreement as it is originally signed between the farmer and the service provider, but not beyond that. But the other thing that they found out that many of the farmers didn't even negotiate or ask about data practices, whether it's data ownership, access issues, so they didn't even ask for it or in the beginning or negotiate for what they preferred, how they preferred their data to be processed or how they wanted to get access to data, manage their data. Why share data? I just talked about this. I don't go over it in depth. There are many benefits. First of all, even governments are concerned that agriculture data is not being shared, although it has many benefits, not only to the farmers and agri-food stakeholders, but also to greater community. And there are lots of benefits, decreasing environmental footprint, increasing food safety through the food supply chain. So they're improving, and when you share data, you can improve the systems, you can improve the algorithms, and you can analyze, extract knowledge from the data. I mean, you can better knowledge and insight from the data. So I have the divided solutions into three buckets. First of all, policy and regulation. First of all, does it make sense to focus on ownership? As a way of controlling data. As I just mentioned, the technology is becoming so complex that defining who owns what, there's a multi-ownership, multi-controlship. I mean, it's just in terms of the agreements. So ownership doesn't seem to be the best strategy. Maybe we should ask for control over data. Can I check my data? Can I check the accuracy? What if I want to delete my data? That's a type of control. Would farmers get informed or stakeholders, are they informed about, if a policy changes, so asking for more control and data portability. In my opinion, data portability, if they have talked about it in Digital Charter in Canada, if they go ahead with those set of principles that Government of Canada may consider, implementing, data portability, when farmers or individuals are given the ability to ask for their data, and then they say, you have to delete it, give me my data, I want to go to another service provider, that will completely change the landscape, in my opinion. So I think what can be done on the farm organizations and farmers association side is to negotiate with the government to give, to implement some of those policies. And the other thing is definition of personal data. Farm data, in many farmers' opinion, some of the data may be very sensitive data, location data, farm dimension size, and many other, specific farm-specific information because they are living there and they may consider that the personal data. Unfortunately, by regulation, farm data is not considered personal data. That is something that could be negotiated. Why? Because some of that data is overly sensitive. For example, every sensor is connected through GPS, and GPS is highly sensitive data because it informs anybody where the farmer or the farm is and where the farmer is at a given time. And because of that sensitivity and because organizations are making profit with that data, this could be something that can be negotiated, that a group of, a set of data that is considered personal data, although it's farm data, and By doing that, many regulations will apply to them, which will protect, farm data. The other solution is for the farmers to take control, operational and legal. As I said, farm data falls under the confidential data category, so there has to be a negotiation. So what if farmers negotiate with the service provider from the beginning and let them know that they have a choice, that if they cannot work with their service, they will consider, I hope there are choices, which unfortunately that's what I've heard is a limitation. They may, as a group, they may consider other solutions. So look at the data contracts, and there are particular questions they can ask. Why are you collecting this data? Will you inform me if you decide to collect other data type? How long you keep my data? With whom are you sharing my data? What are the security protocols and solutions? So there are many questions that can be asked from the technology provider to make sure that the data remains confidential. And one last item that I wanted to mention, and this is my research, is the technology. Right now, the technology, most infrastructure in digital agriculture is fragmented. We need a more unified kind of solution. It could be decentralized. It must be decentralized, because you want to different cloud providers, even keep the data at farm. Are we capable at keeping data at farm and just sending and sharing aggregated data? Because that would keep data private. Consent management, we don't have that consent requirement in Canada, and especially for farm data, and maybe it's not mandatory for around the world. But consent is something that it has to be very explicit according to GDPR, and what data is being collected and how it's being used. And if there is a change in consent, you need to be informed, and you should be able to withdraw your contract. So maybe that's something that can be done. And many other technology enabling tools that can be developed to enable interoperability, identity management, to enable kind of a more connected agricultural kind of data platforms. With standardization, interoperability, this will give farmers greater control over their data to say, okay, I'm going to take my data to another service provider, and also kind of standardization of terminologies and legal terminology will enable farmers and other organizations and other stakeholders to better understand how their data is being processed. And so this is a view of the technology. I'm hoping that in the future we can have a pipeline for management of data. And that doesn't mean we share all the data. By pipeline, I mean you can hold your data, but if you decide that the farmer or the organization who feel ownership of the data, they can decide under what circumstances and how share their data. I'm not going to go over details of the technology that I think will enable that, but I think we have to kind of consider all three aspects of and pushing it forward. All three themes of negotiating with the government, raising awareness and knowledge and of the technology and what should go into the data agreement, and also consider better kind of technology for data processing and management. Okay, this is my talk, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rozita. That was a good survey of clarifies why some farmers have challenges with managing their data and how to share it. So you talked quite a bit and the research has shown that agreements are part of the challenge. If a farmer is presented with an agreement on data sharing, how do they go about understanding it better?
Well, usually we did a study on data agreements, and unfortunately, data agreements are written, as you know, in a legal language. If they can review it, if they make sense of all the just important components of what data gets collected, how it gets processed, and for what purpose, with whom it's being shared, how long the data is being kept, what choices they have in terms of deleting, accessing their data. If you look at, because of the pressure, if you look at Facebook, privacy policy, they are kind of changing the language to make it simpler and simpler. If the language is not simple, then they have to take it to a lawyer who understands the technology. So this is absolutely critical. And then ask questions about, all the questions that they have in a plain language that we understand but obviously lawyers have a better understanding of a legal terminologies.
All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us today, and take care.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.